Thieves' daughters. Free at last. Our previous page was about Adapet, the human son of Lord Ea aka Enki. In the original Sumerian stories, Lord Ea did not teach Eve any of these things, and she was not encouraged to learn anything other than to bear children and nurse them and teach them, because these were most important to both mankind and the gods. The name Eve is here treated generically. There is no one named Eve in the original Sumerian stories. Goddesses were required to carry to term the first civilized human babies after hominoid eggs were fertilized with sperm from young male Elohim. The infants were born in a laboratory like the one pictured above. Some appeared to be male and some female, but all were sterile, unable to reproduce, like some other hybrids. The original stories were suppressed by the editors of the Holy Bible, and only bits and pieces survived that indicate what a great breakthrough it was when civilized human women acquired the ability through changes in their DNA to have children of their own, and human families became possible without goddesses being involved as surrogate mothers. Genesis 3:20. And Adam called his wife's name Eve Hava in Hebrew, which means life for living things, because she was the mother of all living. The long period of time during which the humans could only be reproduced in a laboratory because they were sterile has a very small footprint in the Bible. Genesis 2:25. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. The original humans that were in association with the Elohim gods were only used for labor, to be the servants of the gods, and were pictured as being naked in the pictures the Elohim drew or had drawn of them. They were allowed to mingle and had no need to marry because no children resulted from sexual intercourse among these slaves. Genesis 2:8. And the Lord God Enki, not Yahweh, planted a garden eastward in Eden in Sumerian, and there he put the man whom he had formed, Adapet, not Adam, formed using Enki's own sperm. 9. And out of the ground made the Lord God Enki, not Yahweh, to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight, and good for food, to omit the tree of life, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. 15. And the Lord God Enki, not Yahweh, took the man Adapet, not Adam, and put him into the garden of Eden in Sumerian to dress it and to keep it. 16-18. Omit, they are not part of the Adapet story. Skipping now the part taken from the Sumerian story of Adapet, in which Adapas Adam names all the animals and birds as God BNKI is creating them. Let's go to the creation of Eve, for which no corresponding original story can be found. 20b. But for Adam there was not found an help meet for him. This in place of the more complicated but perhaps more truthful account that the human hybrids were sterile and could not produce babies without goddess surrogate mothers. 18. And the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone, I will make him an helpmeet for him. This is out of order, but makes more sense this way. Anyway, it's a deceptive statement. What was needed was humans that could breed without goddesses having to do all the hard work. Companionship for Adam was not a real concern. 21. And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, not Adapet, some other Adam, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh instead thereof. 22. And the rib, which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. This story appears to be a complete fabrication when compared with the original stories from Sumer. There were female babies produced by the surrogate mothers, but being sterile they were of no use for breeding. So Eve was not the first woman, and no woman was taken out of the side of a man as a rib, which was then magically converted into a woman. But let's read on. Good fiction. 23. And Adam said, another fictional Adam, not Adapet, this is now bone of my bones, and flesh of my flesh, and she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Having first become clairvoyant, seeing what had happened while he was in a deep sleep, Adam then becomes instantly the first prophet. 24. Therefore shall a man other man yet to be born leave his father and mother, neither as yet existed, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh. 25. And they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. By adding this observation, quite likely obtained by a Hebrew scribe looking much later at much older picture seal impression or carved pictures such as I shown here above. One has a word picture aligned imaginary eavesdropping on sexual intercourse. Naked humans cleaving together, becoming one flesh. What has occurred here is that with a few strokes of their pens, and with what appears to be a minor change in the plot or storyline, later editors of the creation story have 1. Removed all mention of goddesses, to make it appear that one male god, alone, created the first man, then went back and created, alone, a woman, the first woman. 3. Removed all mention of any help or team work in this creation process except the help of Adam, the male helper, who was his new male companion, helping him name the new animals and fowls being created, or completely shut out any need for females in the creative process up to that point, except for Adam's statement that from then on, women would become necessary for procreation of other human beings. The plot has been set out for Eve's dilemma. She's suddenly thrust into a world in which she has no say in what's happening, and no knowledge of what her future holds. The males, not her type of creature, off creating other animals and talking their male talk, while she is left alone. She is forbidden to obtain further knowledge, but told where it can be found, at a certain tree in the midst of the Garden of Eden. What should she do? What would you do? The tree of knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:15. And the Lord God took the man, and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. 16. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat. 17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof thou shalt surely die. Sequence is important here. If we cannot depend on sequence, the story is worthless. And the sequence is that this happened before Eve was created, and even before she was thought of and planned for, which happens in verse 18 and later. Skipping over again God and Adam's activities together, which Eve had no part in, having not yet been created, we come to chapter 3, in which she has indeed been created, and interpreting the becoming one flesh verses in the best possible light, are considered to be married. And we also can assume that Adam has told Eve to stay away from that tree. Enter the serpent. Genesis 3:1. Now the serpent was more subtle than any other beast of the field which the Lord had made. Sticking with the story as the Hebrew scribes have now rewritten it, God BNKI had created or bred this serpent, and Adam ADAPA had named it. Perhaps he named it subtle talking serpent, or even subtle talking serpent located in the tree of knowledge. Either way, it's a radical departure from the Sumerian history, in which all the BNKI family of gods had the serpent as their emblem. In the Sumerian stories, serpents are good. In the Bible story, they're evil. Also, besides representing anyone that belonged to Lord Yah's family, the family of the gods who created mankind, the serpent represented DNA itself, which was repeatedly represented in Sumerian art, in carvings, and in picture seals as two twined serpents, very close to the modern representation of DNA. By superior scientific knowledge and experimentation, and the help of goddesses willing to help with this project, vast genetic improvements had been made in a subhuman species resulting in Homo sapiens sapiens U.S. But that's not the way Genesis tells this story. Genesis 3:1b. And he the serpent, now an evil tempter, not a beneficial God, said unto the woman Eve, in this story there is no other woman on earth, yet hath God said, Ye shall not eat of the fruit of every tree of the garden. 2. And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. 3. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God had said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. The hidden meaning here is sexual, as before. Sexual touching leads to sexual intercourse. Swapping of DNA. The snakes entwine, begin replicating, and 9 months later, a child is born. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. 5. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. 6. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise. She took of the fruit thereof, and did eat, and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. 7 And the eyes of them both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and made themselves aprons. Truly married at last, doing things together for a change. By the end of chapter 3, cursed by God and forced to leave the Garden of Eden, never to return, and by chapter 4, out in the out world having children and populating the world with children carrying their superior DNA, but labeled as sinners, with the sin blamed on Eve. Genesis 4:1 And Adam knew his wife, and she conceived, and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. Another possible translation, I have gotten a man. He is the Lord. 2 And she again bare his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. Thieves' daughters. Freed at last.